Hi, everyone, and welcome to Believe in Big Ten. I'm Tom Hannafin. He is Rhett Lewis from the Big Ten and NFL networks, and we are digesting everything that happened this past weekend in Big Ten football, and we are on the brink of a mega matchup this coming weekend with Rhett Lewis's beloved Indiana Hoosiers, undefeated visiting Ohio State at the Horseshoe. So we're very much looking forward to that, but first we got to process everything that happened this past weekend. This show is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen with the largest selection of odds on everything: football, the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, the UFC, and other MMA events. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Believe in Big Ten is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. So the big game this coming weekend, certainly Indiana and Ohio State. The big game this past weekend, which didn't feel like it was going to be a big game going into it because we kind of thought the number one Oregon Ducks would have handled things a little bit better. Oregon survives Wisconsin in Madison by a score of 16-13. From your vantage point, how the hell did that happen?
Well, good question. But that is the big game without a doubt, based off, the fact that you got Oregon, still vying to remain undefeated and everyone just kind of putting them right into that top spot in the college football playoff. But Wisconsin was like, hold on a second, folks. Hang on. You're coming to Madison. You got to come jump around over here first. And this was, a kind of more traditional Big Ten type of affair, right? Maybe more so than Oregon was used to. And look, let's call it for what it is. Oregon was without their top offensive playmaker once again in Tez Johnson, arguably without their top defensive player in Jordan Birch, who has been in and out of the lineup a number of times this year. But they did not have the type of performance that I think you would expect from an offense that still is chock full of playmakers. I mean, Evan Stewart comes up big with 10 catches in this game. Jordan James, they relied upon heavily, 25 carries in this one, 121 yards. I think ultimately this is, kind of where Oregon was at the beginning of the year. Just kind of lacking explosive plays, lacking those game-changing type of moments that can break a game open and can, while simultaneously propping your team up, can, kind of chip away at the opposing team's soul. And they just didn't do that. And Wisconsin kept hanging around. And as such, Tom, kept building their confidence, right? Kept getting the Badgers like, hey, hang on a second, third quarter, we're in this. Fourth quarter, we're in this thing. Even if our offense, can't generate, anything, we can stand on the backs of our defense and play. And I thought that was huge for Wisconsin, which, by the way, you think, all right, maybe we're finding something here to take the number one team in the country down to the very end. But Luke Fickell was like, no. We're going to fire our offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, which they did after this game, which we can get into, once we kind of close the book on this game in particular. But it was kind of a symptom of what this offense has been like under Phil Longo since Luke Fickell came. Square peg, round hole, nothing quite fit. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like if they just had some semblance of a cohesive rhythmic offense, you'd be talking about an upset.
It felt like Wisconsin got away from being Wisconsin and was trying to be a little bit more like the Purdue teams of old, which, that spread style offense, which really isn't that special anymore. And Penn State just got done drubbing Purdue, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But Oregon, it's not going to change their place within the rankings. Obviously, the AP poll has come out, and we're going to see what the new college football playoff bracket is going to look like sometime tomorrow night. But we're also thinking, well, how could a Big Ten title game shake out for Oregon now? Because we're going to have a slugfest this coming weekend in Columbus between Ohio State and Indiana. And you can assume the winner of that game is going to go on to face Oregon in the Big Ten title game. I found it interesting that I think the opening line is favoring Ohio State by 12. So it's a substantial lean towards the Buckeyes, according to our friends at BetOnline.
Yeah, and we'll certainly get into that. But I think for the moment, surviving is fine for Oregon. I thought, where they stand here, the fake field goal down at the end was interesting. But Dan Lanning, I think, sent a message there that we are who we are, regardless of opponent, regardless of situation. We are an aggressive, forward-minded, attacking team. And if we see a advantage here, even if we don't execute it, but if we see an advantage, we're going to call it. And I think that kind of tells you what this is all about for Oregon. Like they are not going to sit back and try to not lose. They are going to go and try to win the game at all costs. And I think that's what that told us. And I think that's kind of invigorating if you're an Oregon fan. Yeah, sure. Would you love to have seen them, maybe execute that a little bit differently, kick the field goal and feel a little bit better about yourself at the end? Sure. But that's not the way it went. And, they went all out for it. Didn't get it. Still end up coming up with the dub. I think you got ultimate respect and confidence in your defense there. And I think that's something that has buoyed this Oregon Ducks team all year long.
Right now, it's survive and advance for a lot of teams in the Big Ten. Let's get to our biggest quarterback, playmaker, and defensive performance of the weekend. We're going to round out some of the bigger games on the weekend as well. But, Rhett, I'll defer to you to get started here.
Sure.
Who is your quarterback of the weekend in the Big Ten?
Jaden Maiava. I think it's hard to really, look at look anywhere else in this landscape. I mean, this is a guy who threw for nearly 260 yards, accounted for 4 total touchdowns, but man, did it not look pretty early on, right? You're talking about a player who completed 2 of his first 7 passes and also threw a pick 6.
Yeah.
But then went on an absolute tear, right? Completed his next 9 passes to 5 different Trojan receivers in this game, had at least 4 targets. So he was moving and spreading the ball around. He showed you some of that athleticism in the pocket that we had seen sprinkled in with Miller Moss. Not going to say that was, totally extinct from the USC offense without Maiava in there. But I think with Maiava, you see just a little bit more there. You see a little bit more plus in the run game, a little bit more opportunity there. And you're seeing Zachariah Branch start to become a bigger facet of the offense. I don't think that's any coincidence. Deuce Robinson has his best game as a Trojan wide receiver. I don't think that's a coincidence. Kyron Hudson gets back in the end zone. I think you just saw some of the elite arm talent. You saw some of what made him, a highly coveted guy that was, maybe on his way to Georgia before he ends up at SC after his freshman campaign at UNLV. So I give a big time hat tip to Jaden Maiava for what he did in a tough spot for SC, right? This is a gotta have it game if you're trying to get to bowl eligibility here for the Trojans, which is a strange place to be in considering the blue blood nature of that program. But here we are, and I think they've found something here, and hopefully they can build on it.
Yeah, and at the same time, I feel for Miller Moss because I just don't think the problem was Miller Moss in this whole USC offensive debacle.
No, I would agree with you on that, Tom. I think, I don't know that I would go so far as to call it scapegoating, but I think a lot of times if you're Lincoln Riley and a coach in that situation, hey, we got to find something to get this thing going. And whether we got to, score more, even if we feel like we're doing what we should be doing offensively, if we got to take it to another level, and if I feel like I got to put it to another player to take us to that other level, I think that's what Maiava did. I think Miller Moss, competent, quality. I wouldn't say elite. And I don't think Maiava is elite yet either, but I think he's got more of that elite potential than Miller Moss at this point.
Higher ceiling. And my condolences to Nebraska fans. It's just, at this point, I hope the season ends quickly for the Cornhuskers. My biggest quarterback performance of the weekend, I would have been biased and gone with Drew Aller because he was 17 of 19 really for 2 touchdowns, but I'm going to attempt to not be biased, and then I'm going to be biased here in about 5 minutes. My biggest quarterback performance from the weekend, I'm going to give it to Rutgers quarterback Ethan Kaliakmanis, transfer from Minnesota. 20 of 30, 238 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns, and then 7 carries for 26 yards. Just an important game for him in that I've not exactly been the biggest fan of his evaluation as an overall athlete, but the way that he's fit into what Rutgers offense is, it's a leather helmet style of game from Schiano. So they want to be able to run the football, run play action. So the instances when they've put the ball into Kaliakmanis' hands to do some significant things in the passing game, he hasn't always come up with the answers. So for Rutgers to win at Maryland, which is an inconsistent team to begin with, Billy Edwards was asked to throw the ball 55 times. It's not a recipe for success with his skill set. They can be hot and cold, the Maryland Terrapins. So Rutgers took advantage and got themselves an important win, kind of like what you were saying with USC, is that they just need to keep pace. There's probably half a dozen teams in the middle of the Big Ten right now that are all,
Yeah.
quote, just trying to keep pace to try and get themselves to 500 or better so they can make a bowl game right now. But my hat's off to Callie McManus.
Yeah, I would say it's been a tough season for Rutgers, right?
Yeah.
And an even tougher go for Ethan Kaliakmanis. But man, he used that somewhat of a revenge game against Minnesota to really kind of jumpstart the back quarter of this season for the Scarlet Knights. And now we're going to be talking about bowl eligibility here for Rutgers if they keep this thing going. So I think that was obviously huge for them, and getting Kyle Monangai back was a big key for Kaliakmanis as well. He ends up going for 3 yards shy of the century mark and found the end zone twice. And do you remember, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Demir Miller was my playmaker. 8 catches. I think it was 2 weeks ago.
I think
8 catches, 100, or maybe it was against Minnesota. 8 catches, 107 yards, and a touchdown. And I'm telling you, he is quickly becoming a guy to watch, not only at receiver in this conference, but maybe as we get into the spring draft evaluation world in the NFL, he's got some of that quality. And that's, again, what I mentioned, that some scouts had him kind of as a guy to watch this season who could.
It's a really good backfield there in Piscataway. I'm going to dive in with my biggest playmaker. Remember, I said I wasn't going to be biased. I'm going to be biased. For the second week in a row, for me, it's Penn State tight end Tyler Warren. Because, 8 catches for 127 yards and a receiving touchdown on the double pass, the lateral to Drew Auer, and then the completion, just killing the zone coverage that Purdue was putting up there. Then 3 carries for 63 yards and a rushing touchdown. Tyler Warren led Penn State in rushing and receiving yards, according to my extremely thorough research via ChatGPT. The last time this happened was in 2019. Jalen Weidermeyer of Texas A&M did this against South Carolina. Now, his stats for that game were 3 catches for 41 yards and a touchdown, 2 yards from Kellen Mond once upon a time.
Kellen Mond, hello.
I know. And then carried the ball twice for 28 yards. One of those went for 24 yards. So it's safe to say what Tyler Warren did was exponentially better than that record set before.
Yeah.
But we talk about the Horning Award. I think that makes all the sense in the world for Tyler Warren as the most versatile player in the country. Then there is this sneaky conversation going on in terms of the Heisman, is that I don't think Tyler Warren is going to win it. Extremely difficult for a tight end to do so. But should he be invited to New York? I felt so much, and I'm curious what you think, watching television coverage this past weekend, is that all of a sudden the largest media outlets were all of a sudden saying, it's like, man, we should be looking out for Colorado. Man, Travis Hunter's a lock for the Heisman. And I was like, I wasn't necessarily feeling that. And it feels like the machine is moving in the right direction. There's really no clear guy. It could have been Milroe had Alabama been more consistent. It could have been Cam Ward had Miami continued to win.
Lost to Georgia Tech,
but I struggle to look at what Travis Hunter has done statistically for his team and say it's better than Tyler Warren. I think he's a unicorn. They're both unicorns, period. And it's who's been the most outstanding player in college football. We have to remind ourselves of that when it comes to the Heisman.
Yes, and I would agree with you on a couple of those fronts, specifically, statistically, but with Hunter, I don't think it quite stacks up to what you would expect a Heisman Trophy wide receiver to be putting up, or what a Heisman Trophy, Charles Woodson would be doing as well. But I think because he has kind of become the best of both worlds for that team, and a big reason why we're talking about them again this late in the season and not for an epic losing streak is because of what he's done. And I think, anytime you get a player who's playing over 100 snaps a game, like, you got to look at that through a different lens. So I do understand the Heisman talk there, and I think he's going to be well positioned when we get to draft evaluations in the spring at the very top of this draft as well, especially with the lack of, kind of obvious and, for sure quarterback prospects at the very top as well, outside of, his teammate Shedeur Sanders and Quinn Ewers and that crew. So, but by the same token, if you're gonna, laud Travis Hunter that way, you kind of have to do the same for Tyler Warren. Even though it's not on both sides of the ball, it's with the ball in his hands in a variety of ways, right? So like that's kind of where I think your argument makes sense. He's not going to win it. No. I don't necessarily think he should win it. I don't think while it's been crazy for a tight end, I don't think it's just been crazy enough overall. And then do I think he's enough to get invited? Yeah, I do. And I think that's kind of the cool piece of this thing, right? You've got these two kind of unique campaigns for the nation's top collegiate award. And I think that would be kind of a cool visual to see there, and earned but by both of them. So I'll go with that. All right. My playmaker in this week 12 of college football is Carnell Tate. And I know that this was not like the most ridiculous stat line that we've ever seen from a receiver, especially an Ohio State receiver. But the fact that we're talking about a player who's, the third receiver on that team and could be a starting receiver on a lot of teams in this conference, Carnell Tate from Chicago goes into Wrigley Field and hits a home run. Right. I mean, 2 touchdowns on 4 receptions and 52 yards. I just thought that was a big piece for Ohio State to find and to really cultivate outside of Emeka Egbuka and outside of Jeremiah Smith as you go into this crucial stretch of the season starting this weekend in Columbus, with literally every network pregame show going to Columbus, right? College game day is going to be there. Big Noon Kickoff is going to be there. Games on Fox. You've got the Big Ten Network pregame tailgate is there as well. So like literally everything you could imagine is going to be there watching this game. And I think the fact that Indiana really is going to have to deal with another piece and another weapon and another aspect of this Ohio State offense that can hurt you is worthy of the distinction of playmaker of the week for me for Carnell Tate.
I agree with that. Very cool visual playing at Wrigley. I think that's just a really cool experience. Yeah. $850 million for Ryan Field. Northwestern needs to take some of that money, not necessarily for the stadium, but they need to find more of it and be like, we should get some players that will make you want to go to this stadium that seats 35,000 people. I love the renders with the little ice skating rink in the Christmas Village. Beautiful. Just adorable. I think it's wonderful. But like, are they going to be able to put butts in seats?
Yeah. Hopefully. Again, it's only 35,000, but look, it's going to be cool. It obviously matches what they've built on the lakefront out there, which is not talking about the temporary stadium, talking about their facility.
Lakefront, like makeshift stadium, looked pretty cool.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
And how much did that cost?
$10.
A little bit less, but that's all right.
Moving on.
Right.
So we'll move on here. Biggest defensive performance of the weekend. Yeah. What do you think?
I'm going Illinois in this one. And I think for Illinois, they've kind of fallen off the map a little bit after, a kind of early to mid-season surge that had them in the top 25 and, knocking off, quality opponents. But this was a defensive dominant type of performance here. And I'll just go through some of it for you. This was a defense that held the Spartans to just 2 third-down conversions on 15 tries. That is winning football. That is getting off the field. That is providing Luke Altmaier and Josh McCray the opportunity to put the ball in the paint, which they did 5 times combined in this game. I would say that, they only one of their third-down conversions. Michigan State was in the second half. So, again, your defense is really playing, and shutting the door at the end. They held Michigan State to just 87 rushing yards in this game. First time this season, they've held the team under 100 yards on the ground. So you're playing, some of your best football at a really crucial point of the season. And then I look at the fact that they had 5 sacks in this game of Aiden Childs, who is an elusive athlete. They had 8 tackles for loss. Third time this season, they've had at least 5 sacks. Seth Coleman had 2 of them. Gabe Yakis had 1.5. So that I felt like was pretty dominant, both in stopping the run, in harassing the passer, and in putting your offense in the best possible position to build a lead, maintain a lead, and then close the game out at the end, which they did 38-16 over Michigan State.
Made it a very easy afternoon for Altmaier and company on offense. My biggest defensive performance, despite the loss, I think it's Wisconsin. You held Oregon to 16 points. You picked off Dylan Gabriel. You held him to 7 yards per completion. You limited Oregon to less than 4 yards per carry rushing. And more importantly, you held Oregon to 5 of 15 on third down. Now, it sucks that you lost, but at the same time, that is what I have always thought of when I hear Wisconsin football is outstanding defense.
Yeah.
And especially that's the same thing I thought of when it comes to Luke Fickell. That's something that he has made a hallmark of his teams for many years. So Wisconsin is something to build off of there. I, for one, am glad that they're moving on from Longo. I never want to see somebody lose their job, but I think it's been, as you put it before, square peg in a round hole. They need to get back to what they do best. Braden Locke, just too inconsistent offensively, but you have this defensive strategy that you can lean on. And in this era of NIL and the transfer portal, Wisconsin has been picked off here and there because of the immense talent that they've been able to utilize. It's right in their backyard. So it's become much more difficult for them to recruit, but for them to still perform at a high level, focus on like basics such as tackling, zone assignments, discipline, defense. Those things get lost often when you do have guys come in from the transfer portal, and they've tried their best to supplement it. So my hat's off to Wisconsin. It sucks to get a moral victory, but still holding the Ducks to 16 points and all the stats I just mentioned, I think was pretty impressive.
Just one play allowed over 15 yards after the first quarter. So as we were talking about with Oregon, like lack of explosives, like that was a big deal for this Oregon Duck offense and really for this Wisconsin defense to stay in the game. I mean, the fact that they were, they allowed 329 rushing yards against Iowa and then was able to, kind of keep Jordan James, had 100 yards, but still they were not dominated on the ground by Oregon in the way they were against Iowa, which was obviously a huge deal. And, I thought they held Dylan Gabriel without a touchdown pass. First time an opponent's done that since he's been at Oregon. So, again, hats off to Wisconsin. Certainly earned and deserving of that distinction as the best defense in the conference this week.
To round out the performances this past weekend in the Big Ten, as we mentioned, Ohio State handles Northwestern at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Penn State just dominated what is a bad Purdue team. There was very little to take away from that other than the Tyler Warren show. Penn State just trying to get out of that as healthy as humanly possible. Got to win. As long as they continue to win, they will be in the college football playoff. Washington beats UCLA on Friday night. UCLA, we kind of thought the other week was, maybe they're on to something. They had something good with Garbers. They were running the football well. Washington gets a victory at home. We mentioned Rutgers defeating Maryland, Illinois beating Michigan State, USC beating Nebraska. All respect to everything that happened this past weekend. I know you and I are thinking about the exact same thing over the next 6 days. Indiana, Ohio State. Now, the one benefit I do feel, again, the bye week for Indiana could not have come at a better time. And I don't think Ohio State is necessarily in a situation where they're banged up too much or anything. They've had their injuries along the offensive line. But this is just a mega clash. And this is the fun part now with the 12-team college football playoff is you get these eliminator games, kind of like what we got to enjoy with Georgia and Tennessee. Now, are either of those teams completely eliminated? Georgia might have just saved their season. Tennessee might have been eliminated because of what just happened. A lot of things still have to play out, but this really feels like an eliminator, at least from the Big Ten title game and getting yourself a first round bye. Both teams, I have expectations, will make the playoff, but you and I talk about it all the time. Anything can happen. It's hard to win, and especially this time of year, if a team loses, do they then lose motivation? So going into this game, what do you think is going to be the critical factor?
It's Indiana finding a way to maintain an explosive offense. It's finding a way to defeat one-on-one matchups on the outside. It's finding a way to create explosives and to kind of keep the pedal to the floor offensively without getting bogged down behind the sticks, without being in third and long constantly. And by keeping the entire playbook open to offensive coordinator and play caller Mike Shanahan. Like I think that they've got enough playmakers. But they've got to stay ahead of the sticks. They've got to stay in favorable situations because you don't want to find yourself, look, the one place where the depth is starting to show up a little bit is that they're down to their third offensive guard. Really, their fourth depth chart wise, fourth guard is now starting in this game for the second week in a row after Tyler Stevens assumed the starting role for Drew Evans, who had been in a starting role for Nick Kidwell since the start of the season. So can they hold up against that interior? Can they keep Curtis Rourke clean, who we know is not the most fleet of foot or mobile player in the pocket? He can move around a little bit, but I think that is kind of where I'm leaning right now. Can you beat man coverage when you have to? Can you find a way to win one-on-one matchups against a team that is, superiorly talented? We know that. I mean, there's just no way around that. Are they the most talented team on paper in this matchup, Ohio State? Absolutely. But I've said it to you, Tom, many times. I've said it on a number of platforms. I think Indiana is the best overall team, unit to unit, player to player, all 11 moving in the same direction at once for the same goal as any team in the conference. I think they are the best in that aspect. Some of the parts is sometimes better than just the star power. And so I think that's what has driven Indiana this year. And I think if they're to win, that is what will drive them in this game as well. You see anything differently on that front?
No, I completely agree with you. I think if Indiana can make Will Howard win the game, that's going to be probably your best bet. Having watched thoroughly the Penn State-Ohio State game, Will Howard had himself a good game. He had a relatively clean pocket. He had a running game to support him. He made the plays that he had to. Penn State was able to limit the explosive plays. So I think if Indiana can do something different, do something similar, that's going to be very important. But if you put the game on Will Howard and you make him think and you make him uncomfortable back there, that's something Penn State was not able to do. He was able to work within the scheme. They schemed a lot of guys open. They got favorable mismatches against linebackers to score both their passing touchdowns to wide receivers. So you've got to be careful of those situations. But I do still think Will Howard is not the weakest point of this team by any means. Their offensive line, as I mentioned, has been banged up, but they still have a lot of talent there. So they're able to withstand a lot of the things you're able to throw at them defensively. But if you can make Will Howard think and make decisions under duress, that's going to help Indiana quite a bit, especially on the road. That's the even greater challenge. But I feel good considering Indiana has this week to prepare for this, to rest up. If there's any bumps and bruises, you're taking care of those things and you're just sitting back and watching and getting ready. Now, the question I have is for our YouTube viewing audience. I'm wondering the same thing. Where is your SIG towel?
Oh, don't you
What have you done with your life?
Don't you worry, my friend. We are here. We are here. We are here, buddy.
It's
we are ready.
You
know what? You're
it's
right.
Windiana week.
It is. And we are just going to go ahead and live stream the reattachment. It was on bye. We were on a bye week.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're back.
We're back.
And now we're back, baby.
Later on this week, on Believe in Big Ten, we're going to dive into this even more so.
Well, and look, and while we're on this topic, look, Kurt Cignetti gets the extension, right? Gets a big contract.
I mentioned that.
8 years, $72 million, like highest paid Indiana University employee in university history. By far the biggest financial commitment given to an athletic department employee in this program and in this department in university's history. Well earned. I was listening to my buddies Tom Luganbill and Barrett Salee on College Sports Radio over on Sirius XM, which of course you can find this program each and every week as well. And Tom was saying, a little concerned about the giving the extension into year one, because I think we've seen that when you don't prove sustained success, that rewarding, let's call it wave one success can come back to bite you. But I think in today's world, in today's college football world, what you have to understand is that you are fighting for recruits every day. And the moment that they sense any uncertainty about a program's long-term future, it causes some uncertainty in their decision-making process. Mm-hmm. So what you've done here is you've painted a picture for recruits. Like, one, Kurt Cignetti is going to be here for as long as he wants to be here. Right. And nobody's coming in to poach him after this type of contract. You have secured the face and the blueprint of this program for years to come. And what you've done in the process is you've been like, hold on a second. Indiana's now paying their head coach commensurate of what some of the blue blood programs in America are paying their head coaches. We're getting that kind of commitment to the football program at Indiana University. There's probably going to be the possibility for some financial commitment coming my way, right? Coming the players' way.
Oh, the players' way. I thought I was like, we get Rhett Lewis the bag, man.
No, not me. Yeah. So I think that this is overall, this is like, if you look at this from a 360 view, this is a slam dunk. Scott Dolson, who has been on this program here on Believe in Big Ten. And by the way, if you want to get some insight into why Kurt Cignetti was the guy for Scott Dolson, go back into the YouTube playlist here on Believe in Big Ten and go check that out and leave us a comment down there, because Scott Dolson, not only is Kurt Cignetti the head coach of the year, Scott Dolson is the athletic director and executive of the year in college football, because what he has done to resurrect this program after 8 wins in the last 3 years, to have 10 wins right now in year one, it took a special vision. And overall, like, this has been an incredible effort from Indiana to commit to this program. And I think that contract extension shows that.
If you had Indiana potentially in the Big Ten title game in 2024, I don't know if you had that on your bingo card. I would have been pretty surprised by that. But a lot going on this coming weekend.
There's a path.
There's a path. There's a path.
Win this week, and it's a virtual certainty.
Later on this week, we'll have another episode of Believe in Big Ten. We're going to preview all of the biggest matchups going down this weekend. Of course, Indiana versus Ohio State. Penn State, sneaky big matchup on the road at Minnesota.
Oh, yeah. No,
Gophers, you never know.
Make no mistake. Coming off a bye week themselves. Like, that is a huge one in the conference this week.
Oh, you witnessed them upend USC up in Minneapolis. So I'm worried about that. Check me out on State of State, a Penn State football show here within the Believe Podcast Network with former NFL and Penn State defensive back Justin King. You can check out Rhett Lewis on the NFL and Big Ten networks, and of course right here on Believe in Big Ten. Thanks for tuning in. We'll get you ready for this weekend in a couple of days.